Welcome to Pub in the Desert, where we bring you honest, curious conversations about faith and the human experience. I'm Matthias Miller, here with my co-host, Kevin David Kridner. Before we dive in, I want to recap our three guiding principles. Number one, you don't need to be fixed, you need to be known. And we believe that love is knowing and being known. Second, we approach difficult topics with genuine curiosity, not to win arguments, but to understand. And third, we don't come with preset agendas. We let conversations unfold naturally, and we follow where authenticity leads us. So pull up a chair, grab a drink, and let's explore what union looks like with God, with others, and with ourselves. So today, Kevin, there's a very interesting topic that you wrote about recently that has got me started thinking, surprisingly, which is about the topic. And the topic, drum roll please, is overthinking.
Yeah, right.
And one of the things that you presented, or one of the thoughts that you presented in this is like, it's kind of this question of like, what if thought is actually prayer? And I might be paraphrasing, so you have to correct me here if I'm misrepresenting what you're saying. But like, what if thought is actually a form of prayer? And so when you look at it that way, then worry becomes prayer to a false god in some capacity. And trust is prayer towards God, directing our thoughts and our meditations towards God. And there's this really interesting, and maybe for those of us who are dispositioned to overthinking, maybe this disposition to overthinking is actually a misdirected disposition, not towards thought, or it's a misdirected disposition. We were created for prayer, and we've directed it towards living in our heads and overthinking. So love to hear kind of your, and let's maybe start here. Like, there's a line of thought, there's a conversation that triggered this. Then like maybe walk me through that conversation and what led you to some of the observations that you made around that idea.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a classic overthinker. I feel like if there was an Olympic medal for overthinking, if I don't get gold, I'm certainly getting silver. And it's kind of been what I thought was the bane of my existence. Like from the youngest age, like my parents would say, you're always in your head, my wife says you're always in your head, like people have around me have always said, like, what are you actually thinking? Because I'll get into these moods where I'm super quiet and I just am focused and it's almost like I'm not there. And it's just this thought chain running through my mind. And it doesn't matter what it is. It could be a trillion and one things over the course of my life. And so I'm always fascinated by it. And so thinking about it, praying about it, wrestling with it over the last 50 years, something clicked in a conversation I was having with a friend of mine a few weeks back. And this guy, he's in his early 30s, and I was in seventh grade. It was a long time ago, so probably 20. I was his teacher, and we ran across each other in a coffee shop. He's like, "Hey, would you like to get together and have like a conversation?" I'm like, "Oh, I'd love that. We'd catch up, that kind of thing." So he's telling me about his overthinking and about how he's doing all these things, whether it's medicine or it's therapy work or it's all that kind of stuff. And it struck me in that moment, what if what we're trying to get rid of is actually our superpower? So that was the first question I had. What if what we're trying to get rid of is actually our superpower? So that's what started the snowball rolling down the hill.
So, all right. So then, I mean, I've heard a lot of people make this argument. I'm like, yeah, I'm just really good at coming up with ideas. I'm really good at seeing what can possibly go wrong. I'm really good at like, so explain to me a little bit how you see overthinking as a superpower. And I'm gonna dive in here a little bit because over the last number of months, I've come to the conclusion, well, I've observed that at least that I think a significant portion of my overthinking, I would say, has been some form of escapism and reality, through conditioning of and various experiences. basically reality was
Right.
felt to stay present in. And so overthinking became the escape, or thinking became the escape, which turned into overthinking. So I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Like, what's the superpower of overthinking?
Yeah, so you're getting the unfiltered version of my story. So if you're hopefully help me connect all the pieces or whatever. So I think there's two forms. I think there's the escapism. This moment here is uncomfortable for me. I don't know what to do. I'm not sure. I go somewhere else. Historically, we'd call that dissociation in psychology, spiritual direction, all that kind of stuff. We'd say I'm dissociating because where I'm at is too painful for me to be. So that's one form of it, just the going somewhere else, the escapism, which I experience. And then the other form, which this is the one that really intrigued me, how much of my overthinking is safety and security based? And by that, I mean, how much of it is predictive? How much of it is playing out scenarios so I'll be prepared for when it eventually comes? How much of it is me making my world safe for me to be in? Though those were the thoughts that started to cascade in my mind.
And if I can dovetail on the safety and safety seeking, I think one of the things that can be really easy to fall into is you overthink to account for information that you don't have and that you can't get without having the experience.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Exactly. And so that was kind of what was cascading in my mind. And I started to think, I took a step back. And granted, this is all happening in the midst of a conversation with somebody across from me.
Yep.
So our last interview we had with Kenneth was he was talking about unceasing prayer and how he has a prayer that he says even if he's engaged with somebody, the Jesus prayer, Lord, have mercy on me, a sinner, and how he learned how to be that in unceasing prayer. And I was starting to think like, okay, if I'm trying to strategize and predict and escape and solve all these things, maybe that is a form of unceasing prayer. It's just orientated towards the wrong God. Either myself, most often myself as the solver and fixer of situations, or other people's thoughts and opinions. It was like, how many arguments have you had in your head with somebody else when they're not present?
Right.
How are those not? And I started to think about this. I went back to Genesis 3. God in the garden. God's in the garden. They're walking with him in the cool of the day. There's these conversations happening. But it struck me there were also gods in the garden. That other voice, those other voices. And the gods in the garden were the problem because they started listening to the other voices. And again, this is how it was shaping into a thought process for me.
Yep. So okay.
Yeah.
So to that point, though, by the way, your Wi-Fi, your connection's a little glitchy. I don't know if you have a simple thing to fix it, but
Oh,
um, the
let me see.
sure. But so while you're doing that, so one of the things, so what if these thoughts are a misdirection to a God? So then the follow-up question is, if you're in the middle of a situation where you have an argument with somebody in your head, like there's, I think we would run through any number of scenarios of overthinking. So if you just think of it as like, I mean, think of it as kind of like this cascading fan, and you pick a blade, and um, one blade is like the overthinking of winning an argument against somebody else. Like, how would you? I mean, it makes sense how that's worried, how that's not trusting God, how that's all of that stuff. But like, actually call it a God. Like, what is the God my own ability to control outcomes, to be able to think of logic and rebuttals on the spot that in some ideal sense kind of elevating good,
Yeah,
or
it's a preparatory response for me. In that if I can play the scenario out and I'm in this position, then I know what I could say in that moment.
right.
It's a preparatory response for me. And that's been what I've done the entirety of my life is play out a million and one scenarios. So whatever scenario comes to me, I'm prepared for it. And
Right.
that's great until this scenario comes to you that you were not prepared for,
Right.
that you never imagined.
Which is why the posture of faith and trust is really the only posture that you can use to prepare for something. I mean,
Right.
I have to think of I mean, so yeah, my wife and I are in the middle of like at the time of this recording, we're like smack dab in the middle of like our annual vacation Bible school that we do with, and multiple churches and or folks from multiple churches, and we've got a couple hundred kids showing up every night and all this stuff.
Wow.
And so you have a live event, and there's always, I mean, it is predictable. I mean, every year has its own dynamics, its own challenges. Many times, anytime you do a live event, there's always, the a live event goes well when the person attending thinks like everything went smoothly, but you always know behind the scenes there's an event coordinator who just they lost a great deal of sleep or hair or something. Like they just
Yeah. Wait.
yeah wait. So we're I mean my wife and I have sometimes eat dinner at like 11. Last night I was eating dinner at like 11 o'clock at night, but like um,
Right.
it's just what you do. And so what we've come to understand, and increasingly what I feel like if I look back over the journey over my journey over the last 9 months in particular, is increasingly being brought to situations where I'm experiencing the unexpected, the uncontrollable. It's like, man, like I just we've done all this stuff and yet we haven't solved this problem. What do we do? um,
Right.
and that posture, and I think even in the middle of sometimes difficult situations, confrontation, potentially combative or confrontational situations, there's not. I mean, certainly there's skills you can use to de-escalate things and other types of stuff, but um, having that posture of prayer, of submission to God, of understanding, the continuing with all of our lives to come to this position of God, this is yours. Um, I know with this, this year, my wife and I have independently kept coming back to this thing of like, listen, like, there's kind of like, I've talked about this mindset on the podcast before, but like, there's kind of this idea of like, all right, God, if you really want everything to go up in flames, that's your problem. We're doing this for you, not for us. We trust in the best that we know how. And if that's how you want it to go down, then that's how it's going to go down. Like,
Right.
we're gonna do our part, but at some point, like this is all just gonna be a giant fail. Then,
Yeah. Well, there's this reality of surrender, right?
yeah,
Like I've fought for how many years to control circumstances and to be safe and to feel peace and all these things. And what has it got me? But anxiety and fear and all those things. And at a certain point, you have to come to that point. Like I remember when I was a little kid, I don't know, maybe 5, 6, 7, however old, I'd be riding in my car with, or in the car with my dad. He's driving and he's not talking, but I look over at him and I can tell he's having a conversation in his head because he's pointing his fingers and he's wagging his hands and he's like, he's having a full on conversation. Who's he having that conversation with?
hmm.
And it didn't strike me at that time, obviously. But now I look back in the midst of this thought process, who was he having that conversation with?
Wow,
It wasn't with me.
right,
It was somebody who wasn't present, but was present here. And that's what I'm talking about. God's in the garden, lowercase g, obviously. The gods in the garden are those voices that we're in these conversations with, whether it's ourselves or it's with others. And what benefit is it? What benefit is that conversation? Is there any movement forward in that conversation? No. Because I remember that I was, I don't know, 5, 6 years old. My dad's probably early 30s, somewhere around there. So just before he passed away at 72. The week before he passed away, I was sitting in his living room with him. We were watching a sports game, Dodger game. He was doing the same thing.
Fascinating.
For years, he was having that conversation. Now, I wish at that point I would have been self-aware or whatever aware enough to ask the question, Dad, who are you talking to?
Huh.
Yeah.
There's a charismatic comic who talks about why he loves to live in LA and pray in tongues in LA because he can walk the streets and pray in tongues and nobody looks at him sideways.
It's objectively true.
Um, but it's interesting that you're talking like that you're saying this because it's like I mean there's a few thoughts that come to mind. Number one is like I'm realizing too that over the last there was a period of time where what felt like what felt like prayer was still misdirected worry towards God. But what I've also found, and it feels like increasingly what I've been learning is like shifting this, having this continual posture towards like I don't know what to call it because it's just genuine prayer. So much so that in light of that comic statement, like there've been times I've been walking down the street and like I start kind of praying under my breath, and then I see somebody walking by, and I'm like self-conscious, and I'm like, just being honest, and I'm like, what kind of freak do they think that I am, like out here talking to myself, like, um, which dovetails into another random thought. And I'll throw out like three random thoughts and like whatever, but like this whole what if the whole focus on self-talk and fixing your self-talk, what if that's just a completely flawed lens to look at it, like how to fix yourself.
Right.
And finally, to this, the last point, the last thought is popping in my head is like, look at what happens when people age, and it's almost like, I mean, these things do become habits, um,
Mhm.
and those habits become. It's almost like, I mean, people talk about the idea of like you control the habit, and the habit ends up controlling you, and like what would it be like to be because we've also I think we've all seen people like this where as they age they become increasingly entrenched in just bitterness and ingratitude and worry. But we also see people, or I've seen people who are like, as they age, we used to have this wonderful neighbor who was just like prayed constantly. And like that just became stronger in her old age. And what would it be like in my old age to be like, as I start, as I in that journey and process of aging, the autopilot is not worried, but the autopilot is turning to him in prayer for all things.
Right. Wow. Yeah. Right. I mean, you got a few thoughts there.
I'm just,
But
hey, what you do to me, I'm doing it right back at you. So.
perfect. I love it. I love it. Turnabout is fair play.
Score 1-0. Your turn, Kevin.
That that's right. It struck me that the point about the affirmations, because that's a big thing in a lot of cognitive behavioral therapy. It's a big thing in a lot of self-help stuff. Is affirmations, and it strikes me there was an old skit on Saturday Night Live with a guy named Stuart Smalley. Do you remember this?
Oh.
He was like the self-help guru guy, and he would start off the skit by looking in the mirror and he would say, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. And that was kind of his thing. And it's like, hey, that's great, but is that to make yourself believe something that you don't believe? Is it fixing yourself? And how effective is it actually? That's the thing. Isn't that a prayer to a God, which is you?
Oh, and I've tried that, and it's like in all the dozens and hundreds and thousands of things that I've tried in my life. Like I've tried that, and it's striking to me how empty that's felt. Everybody,
Right.
you have all the people telling you like this is the silver bullet, like it worked for me, like, and here's the Christian version, and here's like it gets branded and packaged in a million ways.
Those people weren't trying to get you to subscribe to something, were they?
Well, I mean, they sold me a book, or I don't know, they have, you know, there may have been some monetary exchange involved in some capacity.
Well, and that's the thing that is really fascinating to me. The profound moment that really kind of struck me was this is not a matter of methodology or process. To me, it's a matter of orientation. What am I
Right.
orientating myself to? If I'm orientating myself towards society, or to self-help, or to my friend group, or to myself, like what is the fruit that comes from that orientation towards those things?
Okay, and can we take it one step further? Not just what are we orientating ourselves to, but who? Because I would say all of these people are who's. Like there's the friend group, and even with the self help, there's a group of people surrounding the self help that's driving us to be orientated that way, or and it really is revealing about the relationships that are most important to us.
Right. And I understand it. There's no shame there. Like I said, 50 years dealing with this orientation problem. I'm not shaming anybody who's
Right.
had that experience. But the reality is, if you sit and actually look at what you've been orientating yourself, or who have you been orientating yourself to, and what is the fruit that has come from that orientation?
Right.
Let's see. Can we be honest enough to look at that? Because for me, the reality is, and this is something that I think is a powerful caveat to this thought process is what are my expectations when I orientate towards something or someone?
So I mean, just to make it more specific, let's pick. I mean, self-help. There's an expectation that some kind of behavior, relationships become easier. You become financially more prosperous. Or if you orientate yourself towards your friends, then therefore they're going to like you better. Like those are the types of
Orientate myself towards my work, then I become successful, and then all the goals are accomplished.
get the
But
promotion.
what if yeah, what if I orientate myself towards God with that same mindset? It's about what I get out of it.
But but Kevin, don't you know? I shouldn't even say that.
Are you trying to say it with a straight face?
Um, and also fighting my editors. That's just like, come on, dude, like stop. But anyway, don't you know that we're grafted into Israel, and Israel is God's chosen people, and therefore we should all be rich and blessed.
Right, right, right. Okay, so problem solved. Why
Problem
are we
solved.
even having this conversation?
Exactly.
Uh,
Done. Guys, finally, this is the end of the podcast. We have finally found the answer. It's over. We have no
right,
more conversations to have.
right. We're done.
We're done. Where did these guys go? Oh, I don't know. They just found the answer.
Right, right, right. They just dropped off the radar.
um, right. I mean, to your point, I think it's exactly right. So, but then, so here's another. This is maybe getting way too. This may be overthinking, literally, but how do you know? Apart from two things, like contrast is always what gives perspective. It's why your eyes are separated because and ears are not perfectly aligned and all these other weird things. So because the slight contrast gives you the perspective, the depth of vision. Um, And the only way that you can see whether your expectations are on or off is, I mean, it's one of two ways. One is you can have people disappear from your, I mean, there's a few different ways, but it's only by contrast, I think. And so you can have people disappear from your life, and suddenly, or you can forcibly move yourself out of somebody's life, and you're like, oh yeah, that was the good stuff I got. That was not the good stuff, or they leave, or something like that. Or you can be around other people who don't have those kind of people that they look at. You compare and contrast against them, or you can have the compare and contrast over time of like, okay, wait, 3 years ago I was like this kind of a person, or this was my life, whatever, and today I'm this, and or this part of my life was like this, and that part is, and that gives you contrast.
Right. Right. And that's the reality is we only see via contrast on a physical level, on an emotional level, psychological level, spiritual level, on all the levels. We get perspective by contrast. And
So,
yet you're praying for a lack of contrast.
well, you're using overthinking as a way to escape contrast, to hope that having less contrast increases your insight, which is,
Right. Right.
hmm,
Like this morning alone, I was having a conversation with a friend. She found out she was pregnant 8 weeks ago. She thought she had a miscarriage 2 weeks ago. Today she found out she didn't have a miscarriage. There were twins and she lost one of them. Now, how do you sit in the presence of that when everything has to be fine?
yeah.
You don't. You use language like God has a plan. It was better that you use all this formulaic language instead of sitting in the pain with this friend.
Quote, you don't know what that twin was saved from.
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. We were talking recently about communion. Last Friday, we had this conversation, and
Yep.
the guest was talking about how this denomination sees this way, this denomination sees this way, this. We just see it as mystery, and we invite you into the mystery. Now, there's no promise that in the mystery it's going to be a comfortable experience for you.
Right.
Zero promise. But I don't understand why she lost one and not the other. I don't understand. Now, for me to pretend like I understand is to devalue the experience. And maybe to a certain degree, there's this idea of mystery that in the unceasing prayer with God, those running thoughts, instead of going to Him to fix whatever it is we think should be fixed, we could simply say, "This is how I feel. This is where I'm at, and I'm giving this to you." And I hate that analogy. I'm giving it to you like as if it's gone, like I'm handing it
Right.
over. No, I'm inviting you into this with me. And maybe that's the big problem is there what aren't inviting him into our worlds.
If I could, no, there's so much stuff here, but like the
Sorry.
the over, let's see if I can recapture. There's okay. So if there's a few different thoughts here, but one of them is that if you understand and can put language and context on a situation, the situation no longer has anything to teach you.
Right.
And so
Right.
you have to stay in the tension of all of the, like, I can't reconcile this. And with the uncertainty of I don't know what this is going to teach me. And allow that to emerge over time. The other thing that what really struck me from this conversation, that this is where I obviously in the kind of like the afterglow or the after whatever it is of our last conversation, but what struck me from our last conversation, or from the last episode with Kenneth, is his talk, his the idea of sacrifice as being a meal. And when you look at it's like we're taking this situation and we are it is like sitting, having a meal with Christ in the midst of this situation, and just sitting in the discomfort of the situation that you described is really hard. Like it's the joy, it's the deep grief, it's the guilt about feeling the grief, it's the loneliness and isolation of so little shared experience around it with the people around you. It's, many times such a private, like it's event, and like you're not just gonna, like, so many people are completely unaware and oblivious and don't think about how it's affecting you. And to sit with Christ and to fellowship with him, as in have a meal with him in the middle of that, it's kind of like there's a sense in which it's a very much a Psalm 23-esque type of
Right.
description.
Right. All this storm is around me, or the disciples on the boat. All these storms are swirling around me, and you set a table for me in the presence of all of these enemies. But I can sit here and I can have this conversation with you. I mean, that's changed a lot for me. I no longer want to listen to the radio when I drive, and it's not a act of will. It's an act of surrender. And it's not I need to. It's I want to. I want to have this conversation with you. It's just me and you. And I'm just going to tell you my thoughts. I'm going to bring you into them. I'm not looking for you to solve it. I'm not looking for you to tell me what to do. You're just in this with me. How is that not prayer? When orientated properly.
Right. Right.
To me, that's the prayer.
I want to see if I can find this. There's a I don't know if I can find this passage, but I had somebody once share it, and so this is really dangerous because I've never actually checked this, but uh, in the idea was in the Hebrew that when one of here Psalm 109:4, where the idea is, in many translations it says, it's like the idea of I give myself to prayer, while some translations footnote it as the more literal I am prayer. And
Yeah.
it's like I mean, that's a really poetic, mystical statement. Like, and what do you make of that? But I think maybe what you're describing is some sense of that, of it's like my being has become so entwined with prayer, and in many ways who I'm praying to, like that this is, that you almost become forced to describe prayer not as an act, but as an identity.
Right.
And,
That's
and
who I am.
and maybe it's fascinating to plot this out as a parallel between kind of the sacred and the secular, because there's a world in which, from the sacred perspective, prayer does move from an act to an identity, and even and but then isn't it also intriguing that from the secular perspective, there's also that there's the you're having anxious thoughts to, this is now your type of identity, you're this kind of broken, and this is your
Yeah.
peace.
Yeah. Listen to somebody talk about depression or anxiety or suicidal thoughts they've struggled with. My depression, my anxiety. It's moved from an experience to an identity. My sleepless nights, my, you know, I can't eat, it's moved from an expression of an experience to an identity, just who I am. And I just wonder if the powerlessness, the helplessness, the masks you feel like you have to wear are because you're orientated towards things that cannot do anything for you.
Well, but what kind of a shift is this to think of, to reframe depression or suicidal thoughts or any anxiety, worry, fear? What does it look like to change that language from my to our? Like, what
Right,
if it's Christ in my depression?
right.
What if it's Christ in my fear? What if it's Christ in my all of
Sadness.
sadness, sorrow, grief, joy?
Yeah. That's a different thing because then it's inhabited. It's not just me alone. It's inhabited. Yeah. Most people I've talked with over my career who have sat before me, whether it's I've been called at 3 in the morning to go sit with them, or it's whatever the scenario is, when they say, I don't want to live anymore, I just sit with them because they don't want to be alone. Okay. And at some point, the conversation turns, and I'm able to ask the question, is it I don't want to live anymore, or I don't want to live like this anymore? And I have never once had one person say, I don't want to live anymore. 100% of the time, it's been, I don't want to live like this anymore. What if that this is the incorrect orientation
Yeah.
to the gods, myself, others, whatever it is? What if that's the orientation that's bringing these things about? I had a conversation with a friend this morning. This was a busy morning, Matthias. I had a conversation this morning with a friend who's going through fertility difficulties and has believed and thought that, this would be the case. And they're in the midst of trying different fertility treatments, and they haven't been successful so far. And so she said, like, find myself at this place where I feel like apathetic. Like, what are we gonna do? She's like, but it's not quite apathy because I'm moving towards what happens happens. And it was a real felt sense for her of her words, not mine, surrender. And maybe that's the shift that we all have to hit, whatever area it is in our lives. That all my prayers, all of my focus, all of my attention is directed towards something that has not served me well and has brought me to this place. Because it's easy to stand up on a stage or behind a podcast mic or wherever and say, just surrender. Just surrender.
That's the other answer we can just give and then just stop and
Yeah,
just, you're right. Yeah, just sorry.
right. Well, and you look at it like the idea of surrender. You don't surrender unless you have to, as human beings.
Well, there's no context of, I mean, let's just pick a war perspective from war. It's not like, oh, yeah, sure, like just come take over my country. Like, it's
Right,
okay, I'm losing so badly that
right.
whatever.
And some never surrender. Like there's this story of this Japanese soldier who lived in the Philippines like 30 years after the end of World War II, still believing that he had to hold out. Never surrendered. And when they came and tried to explain to him the war was over and they showed him the documents and everything, wouldn't believe it.
Because rationally, of course, they're going to try to, you know, deceive him.
Right, right,
Wow.
right. And so what if we're in this position where we're too afraid, so we're not going to surrender, so we're going to keep trying everything in our power to not have to surrender. But then you come to a place where you throw up your hands. It's over. It's over. Because we were designed to live in union. And that thought of not surrendering, there cannot be union in that thought process of not surrendering.
Right. But by definition, not surrendering is an act of defiance and separation, or separation.
Separation. Yeah. So like move this outside the spiritual realm. Take it to a relationship.
Right.
Whether I state it or it's internal. If I have the mindset that I'm not surrendering, I'm right. This has to be this way.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
There's Jim Wilder has a book. I forget if this is the title. I'm looking at it now, but I think is the title. Dr. Jim Wilder has a book called Escaping Enemy Mode. And the basic premise is this, that when I view you as your enemy, I cannot have the relational circuits of my brain engaged and view you as my enemy. Like, this is an either or.
Right.
And so in any kind of, this actually takes me back to a recent conflict I had, where it's like, it's one of those situations where you can viscerally feel the other person's anger. Like, this is combative, highly combative, before any words are exchanged. And through the course of conversation, very grateful. Like, we were able to have a good dialogue, and it's just like, okay, well, let's talk about the issue, like what's going on, and you guys did that. I'm really grateful for what you've done there. What can we do here? Yes, we'll see how we can accommodate this. Like, let's figure out a path forward. And at the end of the conversation, obviously leaving all kinds of details out, because whatever. But like, at the end of the conversation,
right.
At the end of the conversation, it's like, oh yeah, we can, like, this person you could see was visibly relaxed, and they were no longer in this, I have to win at all costs. And I mean, it was striking to me how you can see people who are, have so much going for them in so many ways, and yet still have so much fear around loss and not being taken advantage of, and it's just very interesting. It's very interesting to observe.
Yeah. So as long as there is some sort of animus, some sort of motivating factor, some sort of self-protective measure that's in place, we're never getting to union.
Right.
Because my prayer is in opposition to union, whether I voice it or I live it. I have to protect myself from you.
Right.
So there's going to be no union.
Wow.
And this has all sorts of other deeper implications too.
So I'm very curious on a thread that you touched on earlier, because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You're talking about going through people who have completely lost hope of life itself, and there comes some point in that conversation. Here's how I see the progression working out. There's some presence with them to restore them emotionally to a degree that they can begin to question the question itself. Is it more nuanced than just, I don't want to live, but I don't want to live like this. But then it's almost going from like the zero to one stage. But should they be willing to accept that? And this is where like the conversation becomes very perhaps nuanced, very, I don't know, because there's this progression of, I'm going to accept the truth, that the reality that there are things in my life that I cannot control, that are not going the way that I can, and at the same time, there are, oh man, see if I can tease all this stuff apart, because a lot of the self-help will tell you, well, yes, but you are in control of your choices and your actions, so why don't you just change different actions? and
Hmm.
and that's not the accountability that you're calling them to. It's the accountability of saying you've turned yourself to a false god, and the
Hmm.
invitation, should you choose to accept it, is would you be willing to orientate yourself towards Christ instead, and allowing him to be like. And there's this weird tension of, I don't know how to fully articulate it, where it's like there is a social rule that says that creating accountability for anybody with any kind of in any kind of mental health crisis is, uh, I may be overstating this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but like from certain segments of the world, different parts of society, it seems like creating accountability for that person is cruel, mean, unkind, not understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're not wrong. I mean, that's how it plays out. It may not be said directly, but it can play out that way experientially.
Yeah.
But the reality is, and I'm not saying the moment, to say in that moment, no. Our jobs is to listen, to know, and to love others. And most often that means listen. But there will come a time in the conversation where we can start saying, what have you been orientating yourself towards? It's my contention, and I'm curious of your thoughts on this. Human beings, by and large, have orientated themselves towards safety and security. And understandably so. We live in a world where bad things happen and it makes sense. But what's the end result of orientating yourself towards safety and security?
Um, you're reaching for something, so go ahead.
Self absorption. The defining characteristic is this good for me or is it not good for me? Is this beneficial to me? Is this not beneficial to me? Will this hurt me? Will this not hurt me? Now, when push comes to shove, I'm always going to make the decision for me. What do we call that? Narcissism.
Hmm.
Now, there's a spectrum. There's a spectrum of that degree that you do self-protect. We all have it. We all have our own individual brands of narcissism, but that's self-absorption. The entirety of everything has to make me feel comfortable. If it doesn't, it's wrong. That's orientating yourself towards false gods. The God in that world is my comfort. So don't pretend you're an atheist, you're whatever it is. And I'm not saying, may get myself in trouble here, but what's new? There's many religious people in that camp that everything is focused on what makes me feel safe and secure. And that's how I make decisions. And then God's voice becomes in alignment with my need for safety and security. And my whole theology gets wrapped up in what makes me feel safe and secure.
So here's I always end up having all kinds of interesting questions for myself. Like, this is just as I apply to myself, because with these types of statements, because like how do you, like, I've been in environments where the safe and secure thing was not to be safe and secure. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like safety is in the group identity of being a risk taker, basically,
Right.
right?
Yeah, with an Enneagram, we'd call them uh, sixes, antiphobic sixes, phobic sixes, and antiphobic sixes. So you have this. anti-phobic, which is just like, I'm going to challenge everything. That's my response to safety and that's my safety and security focus. If I can challenge every fear irrationally, then I can be safe. But fear is still the basis.
Sure.
Yeah.
So there's that. But then also, like pragmatically, like I've substantially de-risked my life over the last number of months. And so looking at that, there's this question of like, how do I know whether that de-risking leading to absorption? Is it leading
Right.
to narcissism, or is this de-risking part of a more normalized walk of a less like it's such a confusing space to have been in and around so many circles where the goal was to live this heroic, world-changing kind of life. Ambition, God, and by ambition we mean 10x your thinking or 100x your thinking or I don't know what. Like, imagine if we could eliminate poverty from the world. Like, of course, God would want his people to do that. So we should be the people. How do we do that? Like, those lines of thought.
Right. Again, it brings us back to orientation, right?
Right.
If you're orientated towards God, then that relationship is most important, and what is good flows from that relationship.
Right.
If you're orientated to these false gods, then that is what's most important, and that's going to determine your behavior.
And so here's
A lot of believers that, sorry, you want to go or we go?
go ahead. I got it.
Okay. A lot of believers I know, myself included at certain points, wanted to charge ahead and expected Jesus to come behind and sprinkle blessing over what I've done. I mean, if I'm being really honest.
Are you saying that's wrong?
Huh?
I said, are you
Yes, I'm saying that's wrong.
Okay.
Although many operate in that way.
Yeah.
Which makes the prayer for blessing seem really, really interesting. Because are you running ahead and asking him to bless what you're doing? Or are you thinking about approaching something and asking for his blessing in that thing? Anyways, but in reality, it's I'm going to act from union and I'm going to operate from union. And that takes two very different things than safety and security.
So if I could extend that just a little bit, it seems like a substantial portion of any healthy and evolving relationship is understanding. I kind of hate using this word in this context, but understanding boundaries. Like, how far do I extend, and how far do you extend? And but I feel like, so as you're describing this, and I'm reflecting on my own journey, like my thoughts around growth and scale, or whatever you want to use that, of like ambition and things, has been less about. There's still occasionally where I'm like, okay, like let's brainstorm about this. Like, where's the constraint, and what can we do about the constraint, and those types of things. But increasingly, it's about, okay, God, I don't see an obvious solution here, and I've pursued a lot of wisdom from a lot of people, and other people share their experiences about what's worked marvelously for them. And when I really sit down honestly with that, like, none of that really seems to fit. And now I look like the complete, and in some sense, no, but in some sense, yes, like the complete idiot. Because why don't you just do what everybody else does? And
Right.
and that's a really uncomfortable place to be. But you can go to that place of saying, well, what does it look like? So I guess here's what I'm trying to say. There's a long-winded way to say it. It seems like a significant part of our spiritual formation comes down to understanding where again, I'm struggling for words because it's not this clearly defined, but where we stop and where he starts and vice versa. Like,
Yep.
to know that no, there is a nudging from him to explore this avenue, like the timing is right, and to explore this and build this out and take the next step, and to know that, and to know also when it's like, yeah, this is just my own ambition. It's an idea that for some reason I'm obsessed with having it happen, and it's not him.
And can I understand why I'm obsessed with it? Can I actually look at myself and say, this is what is the passion behind this, or the obsession with this, or the motivation for this? Can I ask those questions honestly? To me, those are great prayers, orientation questions.
Right. And this is pretty interesting because looking back, I feel like for much of my life, there were competing needs that I experienced, or competing desires. Like, if if I if I if I give extravagantly, then I have earned favor with God in some capacity. And that capacity may or may not turn into, it's kind of like some kind of investment account where he's going to pay me back, like, because that's what we're told happens when we do that. And
Right.
and then recognizing that, and then along with that, to allow for that, I want to be safe and I want to make sure I have room to give extravagantly. And so I may give beyond my means, and then work doubly hard to try to grow whatever it is, grow professionally and all of these things to
Yep.
compensate for me giving beyond my means, instead of coming back to this place of reality of, here's where I am, and
Mhm.
I will give not to compensate for my lack of validation of
Mhm.
I am in him and he with me, and lack of just embracing who I am, where I am,
Mhm.
respecting that journey.
Mhm.
And if I had earlier in my life and career had known how to live in that space, like there's so much difficulty and overwork that I could have saved myself from.
Right. Right. And that's the thing, is being honest. So for me, I would look at it and say safety and security. Okay, I've seen how that plays out in my life, in other lives that I've witnessed. Okay, what's the other option? For me, it's curiosity and courage. Because curiosity is going to lead me to the truth, and courage is going to give me the strength to accept it, to live in
Yeah.
it. Again, orientation.
My only, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm curious on your perspective, but my only contention with this is that if the fundamental issue is orientation towards Christ, then even the expression of moving away from safety and security can be distorted into something that it's not. Like, it's that.
We can distort anything as human beings. We are distortion mechanisms.
Like, I would make the argument that orientation towards Christ is towards or away from Him is the fundamental essence of what you're attempting to express. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and
Yeah.
and that most times we do turn away from Him because of something we're seeking to protect. But just on the surface, strictly labeling activities as, and maybe I'm just completely belaboring a point here, but strictly looking at activities and labeling them as safe and secure versus not is a very shallow interpretation.
Not enough.
Not
Very
enough.
shallow interpretation. Yeah. So let's say you orientate yourself towards Scripture. Everything in there. It's just my life. Okay, awesome. The Scripture was used to justify the Holocaust and slavery and the Crusades. Now, I'm not saying that's a problem with Scripture. I'm saying that's a problem with the interpreter.
Yeah.
If that, because you're asking about orientation, is this fun? Yes, orientation unto union.
Right.
That's our path towards union. Now, you cannot tell me that if I'm orientated towards union, which is love, grace, mercy, kindness, gentleness, all the fruits of the Spirit, I'm orientated towards that, then I'm going to be able to go out and take the life of another.
Right.
Or enslave another. You can't tell me. Not saying I won't do those things, but like David, when Nathan comes, oh God, that's me.
Right.
And I collapse because I see, so that's the contrast. I see so starkly contrasted what I say is important to me and what my actions in that moment showed was important to me.
Which is one of the reasons why union can be simultaneously breathtakingly beautiful and gut-wrenchingly devastating.
Yes. Yes. Because it becomes a lens through which I see the world. And it is not fracturable. It's not distortable. It is the truth, and either I align myself with that or I don't.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Yeah. So I don't know if we have more answers or questions at the end of this conversation, but knowing us, probably more questions.
Yeah, probably we're gonna solicit a whole bunch of one-star reviews and be like, these guys are seriously overthinking it.
Which would be perfect for this episode.
I mean,
You're right. We don't
guys.
disagree with you.
We don't disagree with you. It's embodied truth, Kevin. It's like
Right. Yeah. So save your effort in typing that out and just know from the beginning, we agree with you.
we agree with you.
Yeah.
There's a very real sense in this where this podcast is the amplification of our own dysfunction. Oh, good gracious. Um,
And what courage to videotape it and release it to the world.
or folly. Come on, man.
Folly. Yeah. It could be folly as well.
But more seriously, I do think going back to this premise, and this is what fascinated me about the article that you wrote, that your thoughts that you put together, and I shared a link to somebody else who actually came to very similar conclusions through a different pathway, and it's always curious when it happens. But is like when we look at overthinking as misdirected prayer, and perhaps and then start to understand that seeking union is the antidote to overthinking, and that it's the most bizarre thing that I know how to articulate, but it is very true. I've thought about this for years, that the fascinating thing about how much people talk about God's presence. They want to experience God's presence and be in God's presence, and just linguistically, this is not a theological statement. Just linguistically, presence means two things. It means, it's physical and temporal proximity. I mean, it's together in time and space, said differently. And
Right.
so much of what we experience in terms of being present with Christ, communing with Christ, is, I mean, even the imagery of the dinner with Christ is one of, there's a space and time where we commune. And I find that increasingly the antidote to all of the distortions around time are around presence, which is found in union. And much of the overthinking as well comes down to a dissociation between time and space that we're in. So, not to open up a whole other conversation, I was genuinely trying to kind of bring closure to this whole thing. But
Right. Right. I agree with you 100%. The thing that strikes me is like, and this could be a topic for another time. Maybe should be. I see a lot of praying for financial wealth, for blessing, for those kinds of things. And I wonder the caustic effect you receiving that has on the orientation.
that's a fun one.
Yeah.
Just as a little teaser, um, I'll throw this out there and we'll wrap this up. I would love to pick up that conversation. I was reading actually one of kind of our essays recently on the idea of prayer and the Western concept of prayer and praying for yourself versus praying for others. And I've started reflecting on that. And one of the things that I've been doing the past week, and I'm not going to pretend like this is some kind of age-old habit. It's going to continue for years, but praying with our kids for like specifically for just a simple prayer, praying with them for all the children who don't have a safe home and don't have enough to eat. And it moves me every time I pray it. And I
Yeah.
feel like there's this, and one of my goals, dreams, hopes, goals, whatever, is to instill this idea in in our kids of praying with gratitude for the blessings that we have, and then intentionally thinking about people who are around us who are experiencing lack and difficulty and praying for them and heartbreak and praying for them. Like, can we seek
Yeah.
that out? And as I've had this mindset, it's just been like, even this past weekend, there's so many people. I'm like, these people are going through a tough time. These people are going through a tough time. And making commitments to pray for them, which I don't take as some kind of burden task, but I take it as a prayer as well of like, God, help me to, would you help bring these people to mind so that I can continue to intercede for them and what they're experiencing? And it's such a, anyway, I would love to dig into that conversation because that's utterly fascinating to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, and a point where I'm feeling the need for heart change. So thanks, Kevin. Um,
Thank you.
yeah. Well, to all of you guys listening, thanks for overthinking with us. And if you want to overthink some more, leave a comment. You can follow us on all the platforms, and you know that you know the drill. And until next time.
Until next time.